Welcome to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. If someone in your life has BPD, you know how difficult it can be, and you need to learn how to heal from those toxic relationships. And that's where this show comes in. Expert education, expert knowledge, expert insight, and delivered with compassion and empathy. To purchase and book sessions with ajmahari, visit ajmahari.ca. This is the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. And now your host, ajmahari.
Are you the ex of somebody with BPD and you want to help them to get help for themselves, and you still wonder how could you start that conversation? Though you've tried to start that conversation many times before and you were just met with rage, confrontational rage, and you had to leave the room or endure all of that poor treatment, but you got nowhere. How can you help? And how can you start a conversation with a BPD Ex, maybe even one that you don't even want back? Why would you do that? And this is in response to a commenter who's asking these very questions. And why don't people asking these questions still, with all due respect and compassion, no judgment, you already know that you can't do this. So what is driving you to continue to ask, to seek ways to try to have a conversation with a BPD Ex, or a BPD Ex you might want back, which is not a good idea, at minimum, to say, why do you think you're still emotionally driven to want to try to help them, to try to get them into the right therapy or therapy at all? What about you? This is a response to a comment left on my YouTube channel on the video, 5 Reasons for BPD Lying That Destroys Relationships. And is there any biology to BPD lying? Which is also Season 4, Episode 91 in the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast, which you're probably listening to right now. So the commenter says, wow, great content. Well, thank you for that. I do my best. And they said, I loved my ex very much, but I had to draw the line. She would have these hard-to-believe, grandiose lies that were so far-fetched. Well, yeah, okay, far-fetched. Makes sense. It was actually scary. Commenter says, my question is, how do you approach this person to get help? Well, this is a question that comes up so often when I'm working with clients, and comes up a lot in comments and on the YouTube channel. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to the podcast may have the same questions. And I've tried to address this in different ways, and there's probably a lot more to talk about here for sure. But when this commenter says, my question is, how do you approach this person to get help? Well, essentially, I guess you could try once. It's not really a good idea. It's never been recommended that you try to approach a partner or a love interest, someone you're dating, to talk to them about getting help because you think they have BPD, essentially. So how does one approach this person to get help? Well, you can try, but they're not really going to listen, and they're not really going to hear you. So the answer is there is no magical way. And when the commenter says it gets scary, it does get scary because people with BPD, with all the lying that they do, they lie a lot about other people. And more than ever before now, not only women with BPD, but men with BPD, they lie a lot to the police now too, and lawyers and etc., and children and parental alienation. And in answer to a question, how do you approach the person to get help? You really can't. You really can't. Like, you can try, but it won't work. And even if it would work, even if they would get into therapy, a lot of people with a partner or ex on and off right now they just started therapy. Well, they're going to therapy. Well, things have already not worked out for people at this point to where you need to, if they haven't ghosted and discarded you, you need to break up and you need to work toward no contact and healing yourself. Because there is no way to approach these people. They are overridden by their emotions, and they can't muster logic because they're drowning in their emotions. And whenever somebody's flooded emotionally, then you can't really think straight. You can't really think logically. And then the commenter goes on to say, every confrontation was immediate rage, to the point where I had to walk out of the room away from them and ultimately drop the subject altogether because it isn't worth the fight, which is not healthy either. So, right, okay. So you've answered your own question, commenter. You've tried this many times before, and that's what happens. And the other point I was going to make is even if they do start therapy, or even if they're in therapy now, which doesn't sound like is the case for this person, but often people, so many people, I discover this with clients all the time, like often, that they'll say, well, my loved one, my ex, I want her back, him back, the person with BPD in people's lives that I'm working with as clients, or who were in their lives, will say, well, they're in therapy though, and how come nothing's changing? And do you know how many people with BPD, the patterns of or diagnosed, that go to therapy that is not about the therapy and the modalities for BPD, wherein they could maybe get help, if they were actually honestly seeking that help? Do you know how many of them, high percentage of them with BPD, go to therapists that don't know anything about BPD? Go to therapists to get validated. Go to therapists to get heard but never challenged or helped, right? It takes gentle, skilled challenge to help people with BPD and in the modalities recommended for treatment. So a lot of people think, oh, well, my ex or my on-off girlfriend, boyfriend, or my husband, wife is in therapy, so, oh, okay, good. Sooner or later it'll get better and we can make this work. No. Just in so many cases, no. And when you've already been as hurt as you've been in these betrayal bonds, it's enough already. And people have codependency and don't know how to go on and don't know how to take the loss and how to cope and how to get into that healing recovery journey. Even when you do that, it's really difficult. But here's the thing. The commenter answered their own question, because every confrontation, and I imagine they were trying to speak to this person with BPD in their life about, hey, you need help. Each time they did, they had to leave the room because the confrontation was immediate rage, to the point where the subject just had to be dropped, or the rage and the high conflict, the impossibility of it all would just continue to go on. So there isn't really a way. In most cases, there just isn't a way to approach the person to get help. And why do you think, if you're somebody who's doing that or has done it before, done it many times, going to do it again, think of for a few minutes or like quite a while. Do some journaling. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why don't you see that this is a stop sign? A big red flag called, this relationship is impossible, it's not working out, and my needs aren't getting met. And the commenter continues, now here's the kicker. Well, this isn't an all too rare kicker, by the way. But the commenter says, now here's the kicker. She has a degree in psychology. Well, you know what? So what? I mean, do you know how many people with BPD or NPD or even psychopaths have degrees in psychology, whether they're practicing in mental health or not, which we hope not? There are a lot of them out there, though, because I've had lots of clients over lots of years, and maybe some more or less recently, that they've run into these types of therapists. The narcissistic therapist, the likely having borderline therapist, and nobody should be working in the mental health profession, I don't think, in my humble opinion, unless and until they've healed whatever it is that was going on. So in the case of BPD, then this commenter, well, the kicker, he says, is she has a degree in psychology. Okay, so let's go on to the rest of the comment. So she knows everything, believe me, she will tell you. She is now on her, quote, healing journey, unquote, and seeing a therapist. Well, and I would wonder, is that a therapist in a modality for treatment for BPD, or is it just a therapist in general, where people with BPD can go, whether they have a psychology degree or not, where they can go and get validated, and then when they call you the narcissist, and when they're projecting all what they do out onto you and telling the therapist that, the therapist, just sides with them and doesn't understand and doesn't try to parse anything, if they're not an expert in this area. And then the next thing you know, that person comes back to you and just weaponizes what the therapist maybe said, or lies, right? BPD and lies about what the therapist said and just gaslights you. Just because they go to therapy, it takes a lot of years in the right modalities of treatment for people with BPD. Like, what it means is just categorically, really, that they're going to therapy is not going to save your relationship, and you still need to go and deal with your codependency and your own issues from childhood so you can move on. And the commenter said, I'm glad she's seeing a therapist, but she had, yeah, here comes, you see? Just like I was describing. Because so many clients have told me this over so many years. Yeah, okay. So the commenter, I'm glad she's seeing a therapist, but she has this guy so buffaloed it's not even funny. Well, there you go, that's what they do. They pick therapists that are not expert in the area of borderline personality disorder and those treatment modalities, and they buffalo them. And the commenter continues, as she is aging, it's getting worse. Well, here's another thing. Isn't this an interesting thing? Because the narrative out there, it's a pseudo-narrative. It's a narrative I don't believe in, from the APA with hegemony, Big Pharma, and lots of other people on social media and especially on YouTube saying, oh, well, don't worry, borderlines is going to age out and go into automatic remission from BPD. No, ladies and gentlemen, that's straight up BS. I don't think that's like short form for anything in the DSM. No, I'm pretty sure it's not. But just keeping it real to help you to heal and not believe the crap that's out there. You need to be really discerning with whomever you do listen to. I invite you to be discerning when listening to myself as well, of course. And so the commenter, as she's aging, it's getting worse. Well, that's what happens. Because people don't just remit out of BPD. What the heck is that about? When so many people out there are saying that, writing that, claiming that. It's just not true. And then the commenter said menopause is making it worse. And she has estranged relationships with 2 of her 4 children who do not speak with her. Her parents, ex-husbands, and now me. Well, yeah. And let me just say, for some people, I guess menopause, for some women, menopause might make it worse, but that's not why things are getting worse. Because this is the thing, and this is what the APA is doing with hegemony and Big Pharma too. They're trying to create the, quote, biology of BPD, but they're only doing it in women. And there are equally as many men now with BPD, and they're not having menstrual cycles, and then perimenopause, and then menopause. But in this, I don't know, it's a hedonistic kind of ridiculous pseudoscience of, is it misogyny? I don't know. In the APA with psychiatrists that say, whether they're female or male, by the way, I think that females can internalize misogyny. I really do. And there's been psychiatrists like that on these DSM task force things. But the point is, how can we only point to the idea that remission or the worsening is this commenter? I believe him, that she's getting worse and that menopause would be, maybe making things more complicated. But if perimenopause didn't, what's up with that? And then what was she like when she was having her regular menstrual cycles? Because the thing is, this will always make things worse that are already happening for these women. But it doesn't make it worse in the sense that it's just because of that, for example. So anyway, going on with the comment, and about, her children and her ex, I mean, I was, until they both finally died, I don't mean to sound so irreverent, but both my parents were narcissists with comorbidities and alcoholism, so whatever. I worked all through that. I mean, I don't care anymore, one way or the other. And I want no contact from them, in my father's case, I guess it was 7 years before he died. And in my mother's case, it was 34 or 35 years by the time she died, approximately just over 2 years ago. So what am I trying to say here? Well, I was extremely estranged from both my parents because they were so strange, because they were impossible to deal with, and they're just wrecking balls to any child's life. So, unfortunately, but I can understand why 2 of her 4 children aren't speaking to her, and maybe one day the other 2 will go no contact with her as well to save their own sanity. And, her ex-husband doesn't talk to her anymore either. And the commenter continues, she's had a crappy childhood and also has daddy issues. Well, and believe me, because of the onset, the way that BPD really develops in childhood, there'll be mommy issues too. But yeah, there can be major daddy issues. And the commenter says it's always everyone else's fault, or she plays the victim. Well, of course, this is what happens to people who have BPD and what that means and how they can't take personal responsibility. So it's always someone else's fault. And even when they play the victim, I mean, that's just even more. It's your fault. So they're like trying to think, right? And assert when it's not other people's fault. But yeah. And the commenter said, this poor thing, well, he called her a thing. I mean, you're halfway home then, because don't have too much empathy for these people after they've used you the heck up. You got to let go. You got to get your own healing recovery journey going. I'm out here to work with people who resonate with me. So the commenter says, this poor thing is suffering and doesn't even know it. How can I help this person? You can't. And more to the point, I would ask anybody that resonates with this commenter, why do you even want to anymore? And no, that's not a lack of empathy. That's not cold. That's about self-preservation and having healthy boundaries when I ask that question. Commenter says, how can I help this person? How can I even begin a conversation? Well, commenter, and anyone that relates to this, you know you can't, because you've already tried a ton of times and met with confrontation, which was immediate rage, and then you had to leave the room, etc. Nothing will have changed because there is no way to help these people and to open conversations with them that don't just go in that same cycle or cycle similar for people, because people with BPD aren't all the same. Lots of them will just get you into a jade conversation where you justify, argue, defend, and explain everything, and they're still not listening, and they're still not hearing you. So what is the crux of what I'm saying here to the commenter, anybody that resonates, anyone listening right now, is you can't fix them, you can't rescue them, you can't make them aware. And you know what? With all due respect and a lot of compassion, I say to you all, you cannot get them to change to make it work for you. Because this person could be otherwise fantastic if only not for all this stuff, right? Well, that's where I say, ladies and gentlemen, take a look at your codependency. I have a podcast on that. I need to do more work in it. And the episodes are up on my YouTube channel. And also, you need to really look at what are you doing when you're trying to help someone else gain awareness about themselves, where they have a gargantuan awareness problem that is multifaceted. It's not your job. It's not your responsibility. This is not your child. This was your girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, or wife. And these relationships will not work out. And so I've said that so many times. But the only other thing I'd like to add in response to this comment, to the commenter with all due respect, is you already know the answers to the questions that you asked on my video on the YouTube channel, because people don't really ask questions on the podcast. Though there is a way to get a hold of me for that. If you want to ask questions to have me delve into them on the podcast, you can go to ajmahari.ca/contact. Please keep them short and whatnot. Like, this was a rather just nice length comment on the YouTube channel. But the other thing I really wanted to just say a few more words about to the comment. First of all, I feel for you, commenter, and anyone that can relate to this commenter, because you know, like you said, it's getting worse, and it's not just menopause, but okay, that can contribute. But men at about that age, lots of things get worse for with BPD as well, and they're not having menopause, right? So you said that she has strained relationships with 2 of her 4 children who do not speak with her parents, ex and ex-husbands, ex-husbands plural, and now you. Now, what part of all that carnage don't you understand that there's no way forward for you? Why do you want to sacrifice yourself more? Do you want to hurt yourself more because you really think you're going to end up being, and I say this with all due respect, her like hero? Because you can't do it, man. Nobody can do it for these people. If they don't have some kind of epiphany or crisis point or hit some rock bottom that matters, they need to seek treatment in the modalities that are recommended for borderline personality disorder, because like this commenter also mentioned, she's in therapy, but she's got her therapist buffaloed. Do you know, if I had a nickel, I shouldn't put it this way, right? But if I had a nickel for every time I heard that from clients, I'd be a billionaire. So it's a very common thing. And then the other comment I just wanted to go back to, or part of this comment, is the kicker, as a commenter said. She has a degree in psychology, so she knows everything. Believe me, she will tell you. Well, you know what? She might know, I mean, not everything, but yes, she might know a lot. But guess what? Intellectual understanding and knowledge doesn't, for awareness, doesn't make way for, like, it's not emotional awareness. It's not a kind of awareness that people act on. Well, obviously, not very often with BPD. But I mean, in general, when other people, like even people with codependency, which I think you need to look into, commenter, and if anybody resonates with this commenter, because if you're still asking after all you already know the answer, you know you can't talk to her, you know you can't change her, you know that, like, she didn't even choose to go to a therapist in a modality for the treatment of BPD, and she's a psychologist, so she would know what they are. You know, mentalized-based treatment, transference-focused psychotherapy, schema therapy, and yes, DBT has efficacy, but it's not a recovery modality. So I don't, people online all over the place, I had BPD and I went to DBT for a year, and now I'm a graduate of DBT. Well, congratulations, but you still have BPD. So, and the fact that I just wanted to say another word about this too, because I have had so many clients. I guess there's a lot of people with BPD out there untreated. Yikes, look out, ladies and gentlemen, when you're looking for a psychologist. Because I've had clients, it has become really clear, and what they've told me is just like, we can unpack things that a lot of people, unfortunately, in any way, shape, or form, but who've been with somebody with borderline personality disorder, you can end up with a freaking borderline therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, social worker, coach, whatever. Watch out. Be careful. Be discerning. Because so many people with BPD, and maybe even NPD, they go to get their degree, whether they're practicing in the profession or not, but too many are that aren't well enough to be doing it. They go get their degree in psychology or social work or, you know, things of that nature because they're trying to rescue themselves in a way. But like I'm always saying to people with codependency, just because you know a lot and the rest of your life, like your business might be going really well and you function really well in aspects of your life, but the longer you stay with a borderline, the worse that's going to get for you, unfortunately. These people, just because they could be really intelligent and they can take in all those concepts in psychology, etc. By the way, I don't know if it's changed much, but when I went to university and I took psychology along with a few other things, I didn't learn so much about cluster B. Didn't really learn much. I can't say nothing, but didn't learn much about borderline personality or narcissistic personality disorder or anything in cluster B. I mean, a little bit in a normal psych and whatnot, and maybe they have some programs about personality disorders now integrated into university educations, because I went so long ago, because I'm like really old now, you know. But the thing is, I was in therapy in recovering from what I'd been labeled with BPD, right? But I had like 3 or 4 strong traits. And, you know, that horrible childhood background that you have to deal with all of that trauma anyways. And I was going to university at the same time as I was doing a lot of that healing work. Now, I had been going to therapy since I was 15. So, well, I mean, that's not much, because 2 years later I started university. But then, so I was putting some things together, and where a lot of my knowledge base comes from, not just this at all, and not just personal experience, but the fact is I was learning things in lectures in university, and then I was going to therapy. I was putting things together. So like when I learned about object relations theory, and then I'd be sitting in group therapy and you know, working on myself, and, you know, like in that whole process of healing and recovery. And what it helped me to do, it was all intellectual for quite a while. What it helped me to do, though, was look at my therapist and say, because it was a group program, there's more than one therapist, I'd be like, when my prime therapist and this other therapist would haul me into his office, he was the head of the program, but it was a male-female combo, right? Of like, yes, I had difficulty processing things and getting along with other group members. And other group members couldn't get along with anybody either, and all of that lovely stuff. And then we'd have to process that. But that was part of the learning. That was really where it was like a transference-focused psychotherapy, kind of loosely like following that, because the transference all over the place, client to client, transference to the therapist, etc., was golden when, in that program, we were lucky to have therapists that actually were aware of that transference and helping us and learning so much and being able to help us through that. So I'm going too far afield, but what I wanted to just quickly share was that the intellectual, I used to take it to, yes, those times when I would get called into the office, which wasn't about, oh, you're bad, you're going to get punished now, although I felt it was like that in the beginning, way back. But the thing is, it was really about my prime therapist being a woman, and the head of the program guy who did some other groups, who I really respected for the most part. He was brilliant. He helped me a lot. It was like they were setting up the mom-dad combo, right? Because I would experience it that way anyway. And I was already knowing that intellectually, but still couldn't stop that repetition, compulsion relating to them as if they were my parents, right? Now, that was getting better, and I had insight. In some cases, maybe, but for so many people with BPD and so many clients I've worked with, don't think that because your person with BPD has a degree in psychology or social work or any of things like in mental health, that they're going to be able to at all actualize the intellectual awareness of probably not a whole lot about BPD really, but maybe. And then that doesn't help people change or grow. So what I was just trying to say is when I was going to university and at the same time was in this group therapy, if I wasn't in the therapy, what I was learning in school, in university, was not going to help me to create the emotional change of what it really takes to heal from, in my case, I was labeled with BP and never says, so probably like I had 4 strong traits. So the commenter, like so many people probably listening, if you can relate to this, when you ask these questions, you already know the answer. And as much as I have my expertise in this area and I've worked with clients for 33 years and I'm out here to work with anybody who'd like to work with me, that resonates with me, I have to tell you, like I don't have a magic wand. And so I do work with people with BPD as well, but unless they're willing to be engaged in the process and open up and start to get real and all the hurt that involves and how daunting that really is, then they often go to therapists unlike myself, who don't know anything about this, and as the commenter said, they'll have those therapists so buffaloed it isn't funny. Just let me reiterate and re-emphasize that the commenter ends with saying how much she's suffering. Well, yes, and unfortunately lots of people are suffering with BPD, and lots more are suffering with codependency around these people with BPD. You need your own healing recovery journey. People with codependency need to learn how to let go. Now, if you're out of the relationship, if you're not in contact, great. Then you need to take the next step and you need to really heal and work with someone to do that. This commenter said, how can I help this person? You can't. You just simply straight up can't. That's what codependents have so much trouble radically accepting. How does it leave you feeling? That commenter, and to anyone else, just to ask you to think about this, how does it leave you feeling when you can't help that person? And you need to be focusing on how to help yourself, not the person with BPD who needs to figure out how to help them to find their own help. And the last question the commenter asked was, how can I even begin a conversation? Well, I mean, you really can't without going through the same experiences you've had before that you explained in this comment. And my question to you to think about, and anybody that resonates with this commenter, is, and why would you want to? Now, you might have some compelling reasons why you'd want to, but I promise you this much, they will not go unpunished if you pursue them. And you need the harm reduction of your own healing. And at what point, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are with this, are you going to stop asking the question, but like, how can I help them? How can I get them to get the right help? Or, if they're fooling around in therapy with people that, that don't even treat BPD or know how or know anything about it. And often they choose those therapists. I'm not saying anything against those therapists. They may specialize in other areas, or just generally like depression and anxiety and working with people with those issues. Well, the thing is, when are you, to the commenter and anyone else that resonates, going to know that you know the answer to your own questions? You've had all the lived experience of being raged at and screamed at, and they don't want to talk about what you want to talk to them about. And that makes it impossible. So you can't start a conversation, and you can't help her. And why does it feel? People can care. People have sometimes too much empathy with codependency. But why does it feel like you still, if this resonates with you, but to the commenter, why does it feel like you still want to try to help her? She needs clearly to learn to want to help herself before she's going to reach out to a therapist, if she ever will, who could actually really help her. And by the way, the people with the intellects that go and get their degrees, as you know, I went to university and same for me, that's wonderful and that's great. But if somebody has borderline personality disorder and they do that, that's not going to be a sign of a lot of change, because they can, like I said, this commenter did say that his person with BPD or X, or I don't know what's going on there, definitely can probably cite chapter and verse about some things she's doing and seem really aware. But then the next time she gets triggered, feels triggered, and she gets triggered to emotional dysregulation, and she starts drowning in her emotions again, boom, there's the same behavior. Because intellectual awareness for people with BPD or for people with codependency is not the way to healing. That awareness does not help you to stop doing what you keep doing that hurts you. It's true of the person with BPD, everybody with BPD untreated, and this commenter's person with BPD. And it's true of you too, commenter, that you still want to know, how can I start a conversation with her? How can I help her? When you already know it's impossible. You already know you can't. And more to the point, you need to take care of yourself now, and you need to realize, if you haven't yet, that this relationship doesn't work, or it's not going to work, or maybe it's already not worked. I think you said she wasn't talking to you either anymore. So why aren't you focusing in your own healing and recovery process, working with someone, on how did you get where you got, which I'm not, no blame, no judgment, but people don't realize they have this thing called codependency, which is itself a trauma response, and they had a more resilient temperament, so you don't have BPD. The other thing is, but codependency is a form of a mental health challenge, and you need to go and learn more about your history and your wounded inner child, etc. And you need to learn and be helped to put the dots together so that you can stop asking, how am I going to start a conversation with her? Well, how can I help her? It's impossible for these people. They're not interested. And that's a shame and a tragedy. But people have to stop going around the same cycles. Because the commenter made it really clear. My apologies for my dogs doing whatever they're doing at the moment. The commenter made it really clear that whenever he would try to talk about this or have a conversation with this person with BPD, they'd be just confronted with immediate rage. Well, I haven't heard anything in the comment that would suggest that this person, with her psychology degree and everything, is any further along to be able to hear anything else. And when you've gone through what you've gone through in the betrayal bonds of these relationships, you need to get your own help. And I'm out here to help people that resonate with me so that you can stop being on that hamster wheel of self-sacrifice of but I got to help somehow. How can I do it? What questions should I ask? How many more times do I need to run into that rage and worse and abandon yourself? That's a question for people to answer today. So anyway, please know that a lot of these people with BPD have psychology degrees or, social work, degrees or whatever. And it doesn't matter one iota. They go into those university programs. I probably did too, to a degree. But luckily, I was also in a really helpful modality of treatment, even though I was only labeled with BPD. I mean, I had some traits. I had, stuff going on. I had to learn. But I healed and recovered because it's not biological. It doesn't need a cure. You can heal and recover. And a large part of that recovery for people with BPD is finding the real self. The self that psychologically passed away, evacuated to abandonment trauma, and probably the first betrayal bond of a lifetime with a parent that could not be attuned to give the infant to toddler any emotional safety. And splitting begins internally in infants, often with cluster B mothers. All those years of all that accruing damage of a lost self, and when people do choose to get into a healing recovery journey, and it can, as the late, great Dr. John Gunderson said, it can take an average of 8 to 16 years. My process, and I didn't even have BPD like straight up formally. I had like 4 traits. I was labeled with it, and it took me 15 years. And so to really be just like averagely mentally healthy, and people might argue, and trolls love to play games out here, but I healed and recovered from BPD when I was 30, and I'm 65 now, so you can do the math. People are more and more reticent with BPD these days to not get treatment, or to think that DBT, which is an excellent modality for people to start. I'm not trying in any way diss DBT, but it is not a recovery modality. It is symptom management, and people can get really good at symptom management, some. And others will just go halfway through or take a year of DBT and learn some things and then weaponize them against you. If you're still around, if you're still relating, if you're still recycling relationships, if you're still hoping for something to work out. This commenter, I really feel for you, and I feel for anybody else who's in this situation as well, because, oh yeah, you did say it was your ex in the beginning too. Because there is no way to help her. And there is no way to start a conversation with her. And it is self-abandoning and a self-sacrifice that you would make of yourself and your own mental well-being to even continue to want to start a conversation with her or to want to help her. So is your wanting to help born out of codependency? And where does that leave you? How helpless, how powerless, how uncomfortable, how does that leave you feeling that you might want to still pursue trying to start that conversation, trying to help somebody who's your ex, isn't speaking to you? Why are you not in a thriving position in your life going forward now, having left that person behind? This is something that more and more in our world today, increasingly, generation after generation, people continue to think it's okay to do this toxic dynamic dance, and that it's not going to help you to lose more of yourself. Well, it does, and it impacts people's mental health severely to hang around and keep trying to rescue and fix or change or have the conversation or get the BPD into the right therapy. These people are responsible for themselves now. They are adult age, even though they are often the emotional, when they're triggered to emotional dysregulation, they're going to have the emotional maturity of a young child or maybe a young teen. But we can't take personal responsibility for other people's lives. And this is what people with codependency continue to think that they can do. You need to rescue yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. That's possible. You can, all the clients I've been working with for 33 years, people can help themselves, people can learn, people can heal when they're trying to change themselves. That is even a daunting enough process. So please stop trying to have that last or another conversation or how can you help them? You need to stop asking yourself that question, and you need to ask yourself, why am I not focusing on helping myself? Meaning you out there. So anyway, I went a bit longer than I meant to. But there's just so much in this comment that I wanted to take the time to go through it, because a lot of people are having very similar, if not the exact same experiences with someone with BPD who was in their life, is in their life, is an ex, whatever the case. And it sounds like this person, psychology degree and everything. See, it doesn't matter. People can't heal themselves, okay? Like, wouldn't it be nice if that was doable, right? It's not. And I guess I just want to reiterate that when I was in university and, when I got and got through and got my degrees, it wasn't that to help me heal and recover. It was that I was in therapy. And I was in a really great modality. And I mean, I went years of therapy. The last four or so years being in a specific group program. And I healed and recovered from BPD before DBT was invented. So I feel rather grateful for that. Because in a sense, I don't see if, only in some ways, some people in some circumstances with BPD, for sure. But I don't see the efficacy overall if you're going to learn to manage those symptoms, but you're not going to go into a process of therapy that helps you to really find yourself again so that you can really do that kind of deep healing work and know who you are going forward. And that's where people like talking about people with BPD or like I was labeled with it. Point is that a lot of the information I share comes from a lot of my own past experience, and also that I have a lot of lived experience with other cluster Bs. Just because there was a lot of them in my family and immediate family and then extended family on both sides of the family. And, I never stayed in contact with any of them. And I guess the only two that I really, maybe an aunt or two, but the only other two that were really important in my life and probably in a way that was really helping me from the ground zero of nothingness that my narcissistic mother had to offer to me as a young child was each grandmother, that even though each of them had BPD, one quiet BPD, one very much petulant, classic acting out BPD, and one had, alcohol problems as well. That would be my father's mother because he was a rabid alcoholic among his narcissistic personality disordered comorbidity with psychopathy, and the fact that therapists also describe my father as a dark triad or tetrad, or maybe they're not as interchangeable anymore, but like to me it's like, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I mean, is a hot dog still a hot dog if you really don't put mustard on it? Like, you know what I mean? So the point is that each person that's been around a cluster B, whether that's been a parent and then it's a partner, or anyone in any walk of life, in any relationship type, got to stop trying to continually ask or pursue the questions, how can I help this person? How can I start a conversation? When most people like this commenter, you already know the answer is you can't. So the question I have for people who might resonate with this commenter is, since you really do know that you can't, what's driving you emotionally to still ask those questions? And how do you feel? And maybe why do you still want to do that? Because it's likely about something that happened in your childhood that if you get into a healing and recovery journey to explore, guess what? That's inside of you, and you can change that and you can heal that. And then you won't have this compulsion anymore, to repetition compulsion, to want to ask another question, to go through another rage so that you have to walk away again. This is how people lose themselves. And it's not any kind of modicum of minor damage that you're accruing around somebody who thinks they can just yell and scream and rage at you and then some and other things, because they're really yelling and screaming at object other parent representation. So whether you're in high conflict and confrontation with a borderline for whatever reason, or whether it's the opposite at moments of time, or when you get to be on them and you let a breakup be a breakup and you let go and you do your healing work and you don't think about them anymore and you let them go, well, it's really about people taking their own personal responsibility for their own woundedness and coming to realize that if you're still pursuing or wanting to help or start a conversation with somebody that you know you can't, then where's that coming from? And wouldn't you rather get into a healing recovery journey to work that through than to still think about this over and over? And everything that I'm saying, and I'm passionate about it, I'm saying it with compassion and empathy and no judgment. These are the kind of questions I think people need to really take seriously and then take action on. And remember, it doesn't matter if the person with BP in your life has a psychology degree or is an astrophysicist or a medical doctor. They're still going to be as emotionally lost as the borderline who couldn't get it together to choose a career or have a career or function in a career or even function to go to university to get a degree. You can't start conversations with them over and over. You can't get it done. They don't want to hear you. And you'll get punished for it. As this person said, they rage. And you need to know. And you need to work at accepting what you know on a deep emotional level that you need to let go so you can soar and flourish, maybe regroup and heal some things and soar and flourish in your own life that you are not responsible for as much as you might want to be able to help. You can't help. And this is the impossibility, and this is why I'm always saying to people that think they want to go and get their ex back, please understand that people that are talking about that out there right now, lots of people, I shouldn't throw this in here, but lots of people who have a BPD Ex, some people are beyond it now. Lucky for them, hard work, and they're still working. Like this commenter probably might not want this person back, but I don't know. But hopefully not. But then again, hasn't let go far enough yet. But the thing is, so many people are wanting their ex back. So many people, at least a few on YouTube, are just like, I don't know what they're doing, but they're wanting people to pay them to help them to get their BPD X's back, which is just, to me, utter insanity and some kind of a racket. I mean, it's potentially just a scam, because if a person with BPD was going to hoover you, they will hoover you. You don't got to pay somebody money to get them to hoover you. And there's many people with BPD that never look back, and they're not coming back. And then you're going to be tasked with how can you go forward in your own healing recovery process, because you don't even have a choice in the matter. And I think to this commenter, that's what I would say is when you're asking, how can I help her? How can I start a conversation? You can't. And you need to radically accept that you can't. And as I said, at the same time, try to work on understanding, which might mean working with someone in your own healing recovery journey, to try to understand and figure out why you're still emotionally motivated to want to go back for more of what you already got. And that's the same thing with, like, when people want to, quote, get their ex back, they want to, quote, win their ex back. I promise you, all you're going to get when you win your ex back, and you don't need to pay money to do that to somebody who says that's what they specialize in, helping you strategize how to get your ex back, that's insanity. Because when you get your ex back, you just exponentially get hurt. You exponentially lose yourself. And people, you need to learn in healing and recovery journeys why you have codependency, what that really means, and what is that repetition compulsion of yours that you externalize out, that you still want to talk to them again. You still want to, if you want, maybe you want them back, maybe you don't. But you sure as heck don't want to just leave them to their own whatever to figure out or not figure out, or take responsibility for themselves or not take responsibility for themselves. So that means people, that's codependency right there. You don't have to have all the sort of traits or defining features of codependency. No, you just have to be somebody that can't let it go. And you got some codependency issues right there. Because nobody deserves to live their life in a choice, or maybe something being driven unconsciously, you don't understand your choice, of why you keep wanting to ask, how can I help them? How can I start a conversation when you know already it's impossible? So what's happening for you emotionally that you need to unpack and that you need to heal?
You've been listening to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. Our passion is to bring expert information for people that are hurt by someone with BPD. We truly hope you've gotten something from the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. For more or get sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. See you next time.